So anyway, on to the next question.
I love it.
Most important question. What is First Things Foundation, and what differentiates it from other aid organizations?
Sure, man. So First Things is the first thing that I think needs to take place. And this was Buddy and I were co-founders in 2000, really 15, 16. And the first thing is that aid demands relationship. So put another way, proper aid, appropriate aid demands appropriate relationships. So one of the problems with the aid world since the Marshall Plan and the end of World War II is aid has been conceived Machiavellian in terms of Machiavellian terms, which is aid is given overseas to the poor people. I'm going to say a lot of catchwords that'll irritate people, but to the poor people, to the Black people, it's given because it's for their good. But if you look carefully at the whole history of aid, that is not why it's ever given. It's given so that the giver may acquire certain inroads, certain political advantages, right, over those who are being given to. This isn't like hidden knowledge. Everyone understood this. So the first great example is the Marshall Plan, is that the United States emerged wealthy and with banks intact and institutions that worked. And so we were able to, quote, loan and aid Europe in its rebuilding. But we knew, and Europe knew, that there was an uneven distribution going on where they got a lot of stuff, but we got all of the authority. But Europe wanted that because they needed it to rebuild, but they also trusted our cultural, we were of the same culture. We shared the same background. We shared the same, variations on Protestant and Catholic Christianity. We had a common language. There was a baseline of trust. But the same aid concept gets applied. I'm getting to First Things, I promise. The same aid concept gets applied by JFK and in Peace Corps, ironically, to all the what they called at that time developing nations. Let's go into all of the developing nations and offer aid in order that we may beat the Soviets in the game of who's the best big guy on the block. And so aid takes on this notion of assisting the poor by bringing the poor into the orbit of the West. And so it's utilitarian and it's Machiavellian. I don't have a problem with that. That's not a problem. The problem is, though, when the aid starts to get developed in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and right through the 90s, the aid that's being offered is being offered so that those cultures may become like us. Sorry. It's going on right now, too. We can talk about that. It's never not gone on. That was also the colonial model. That's why the British built schools in Sierra Leone. It wasn't because, they wanted Sierra Leoneans to be able to participate in the British cultural worldview. It wasn't like they were going, what do the Sierra Leoneans need? So here's my point. It's the proper relationship, one of equality, that's really important, or at least quasi-equality, and one of love is necessary for there to be fruit. And so we see fruit from this previous aid model. You see it everywhere. There's fruit, but it's fruit for the giving nation, for the nation that's invested. There's not a lot of fruit. I know people are going to try to argue this. I'm telling you, it's not true. The fruit may be in more buildings. There may be more cars. There may be more roads, but the culture itself has been destroyed. These cultures, these traditional cultures are being destroyed. Okay, there's no way around that. People will not be able to debate that if they take a look. So last point. But First Things is a very small little organization that sort of took Cyril and Methodius and the notion that if you look what Cyril and Methodius did, they set out as big Byzantines to go fix a whole bunch of Slavs. But what happened is they went with certain ideas about bringing Greek. But what they did is listened, and they began to fall in love with Slavic culture. And they began to actually give the Slavs what they were craving, which was their own language in which to worship. So that's cool. That was something that was both of the Byzantines, but for the Slavs. In other words, it was proper God-man relationship. It was a proper cooperation. It's what Christ looks like. And so the first thing is you got to have the right relationship. Come on, man. Okay, so what does a proper relationship look like if you're going to go work in Sierra Leone or Mozambique or with the Mayans or in Appalachia? First of all, you better speak their language, because that's absurd if you don't speak their language. I'm not talking about English. That's not their language. English is the British's language. That's the colonial language. So you might go over and speak really good English or French or Spanish. Congratulations. Now you're just speaking the colonial language. No, speak Mende, speak Mayan, learn Bambara. Right? If you're going to be in Georgia, learn Georgian. And so, number one. Number two is why do you live in a hotel when you go there to do your aid work? I don't really understand that. You're on a 6-month contract. You live in a hotel and you got a really nice car that drives out to the village. What? Why? Why don't you live in the mud hut right alongside the people? Why don't you do that? Because I can get malaria. I know. You have to create equity in the relationship. Otherwise, you can't gain the honor and the respect. But also, and this is the point of first things, you can't actually gain insight on the right project, because you're just importing your idea, driven out for the weekend in a car to do a survey. So you have to break down yourself in order to build up a proper project. Now, oh, wait a minute. So I got to live. Yeah, you got to live there. And then you get to share. And so we go long-term for 2 years. And we learn the local language every chance we get. And we learn their language by learning their culture. So what does that mean? Oh, everything goes and just slows down. And nobody in the West likes that. Because donors are much like consumers in the business world. You have to constantly change for your donors. And very few donors are like, talk to you in 10 years, can't wait. Nobody operates like that, right? Just like a consumer doesn't say, really hope this soda tastes better in 10 years. They just leave the soda. They're just onto something new. Unfortunately, that Western construction, that type of cultural imperative, just doesn't work in these very old world places. Everything's slow, man. You have to gain honor and trust. And so first things is trying to do it differently. We also don't do big projects. Now, if someone said, here's a $1 million project, would you guys do it? Well, we would look at it. But generally our projects are, $5, $15, $25,000 projects. And what we do is search for really cool local people. So just to say this real simply, we're impresario hunters. So an impresario is like an entrepreneur. We don't say entrepreneur because sometimes they're not business people. And in the West, you just hear business people. But the key is the local enzyme for beauty, that person or that family or that group of that villages, or sometimes it's a women's cooperative. It's not always one person, but often it's one family. When you find the right enzyme and you bring all the resources you can to these folks, you find the right enzyme. And then what happens is they do the work for you. You facilitate. And then, so our job is to hunt these people and these groups of people. And then when we find them, we can vouch for them, man, because we're speaking to them in Mayan and we're there. Like I can vouch. And then you know who loves that? They're big donors back in America. They like to, oh, you got eyes on the ground. And the problem is sometimes they don't like the speed of our projects, but that's a different conversation. But first things is this attempt to form the proper relationship and to give the proper and authentic aid. And we're not trying to change the world, Herman. The world, that's not even a thing. Like, have you ever met the world? Like, I never met it. So I'm not really interested in changing it. The really goal is to change ourselves. It's to go over and acquire humility through the practice of service. I think that sounds Christian to me. But we don't, we work with non-Orthodox. This irritates people on the more traditional Orthodox side of the world. I'll tell you a project. This is not a project. We have not spent any money on this, but Jake, our field worker in Sierra Leone, a place called Kaiwalan, has recently been in touch with a really cool village that's got tons of enzymes. tons of impresarios. And their number one thing is they want to build a Catholic church. And they have good reasons, because when they get a Catholic church, they'll get a Catholic priest. They'll be able to start a school. You see. Now, what do we do with that? As Orthodox people, as an Orthodox man, should I help them build their Catholic church? Now try to figure that out. This is where we lose some Orthodox, This is where some Orthodox. So am I giving money to build no, you're giving money to help this impresario group, Fatorma and Modibo and Bakari, because they know what's best for their village. Well, get a different village. Well, now you're back into this colonial model a little bit. And so you see, it's tricky, but that's first things. By the way, that's not even a project. We've got a lot of projects that aren't building Catholic churches. I just want to put that out there.
Of course. Yeah.
Did years burn out those words? Did a voice whisper absurd? Did your mind comprehend and ask if you'd last till the end? Traded money and lands, family dreams and plans, for a desert exile and a life of trial.